Have you ever wanted to watch Van Gogh paint Starry Night, but you didn't want to use AI? Well, today you can watch me paint Starry Night instead. Hi, and welcome to Stealing with the Masters, a series where I paint some of my favorite works of art and I steal it by painting it in my style instead. I'm not sure if Van Gogh used a quinacridone magenta base in his Starry Night, but we're doing it here, we're doing it now, we're doing it today in my version of Starry Night. I feel like the level of contrast I had to paint before I even got into the colors really helped to lay the foundation of what I needed to do before I, went all crazy with all the patterns and colors. And maybe that's what Van Gogh did, is maybe he had a sort of underpainting before he went in and laid all the colors and went all crazy there. You can go anywhere along the color range, but as long as you're staying with the same lightness or darkness level as what you're intending to place down as what the original color would look like, you're gonna be fine. Normally when I start paintings, I feel like I always start it with blue, and so today it's a little bit of a change up because I'm starting with the yellow. I wanted to get this yellow cloud, coming along the hills here, because I feel like if I didn't get the placement of this cloud right, a lot of things would start to feel off. It's kind of fun to watch the stars populate. I feel like they just come into being. And then I come in with a mix of ultramarine blue and white, trying to blend that in with the yellows I've laid down, and I'm being careful with it before I start to go bold and place those bright blue strokes, and really starting to develop where I'm placing things, being confident with my selections. Ooh, and then, slowly bringing the swirl in. I love the movements I get here and just the blending that exists. I love the way acrylic can layer on top of itself, and that's definitely something Van Gogh is really good at with the layering. He just, layers and layers and layers, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to lay down the base colors so that way I can go in with the layers later. Ooh, and then I love how I'm starting to just get really decisive with where the contrast is gonna be, and then coming into the foreground, placing down the greenery. I lay down the contrast of the cypress tree, and I feel like the painting's starting to come together a little bit. I'm really enjoying where it's at. Then coming back in on the yellow, trying to brighten it up. I want it to be exactly where I need it to be before I go in too deep with the blues. I'm starting to, lay down the pattern. I'm starting to learn Van Gogh's style and his technique. And, I'm not directly obviously taking it from him, but I'm learning how to do Van Gogh's technique and style in my style. And that's kind of fun to take this flat brush and, develop and learn how to use it in different ways. I feel like sometimes it's easy to get stuck in our own way and not explore and change up what we're doing. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I feel like I'm ready to branch out and get out of the box with what I'm painting. And I love how the pattern, it just brings such movement to the piece. I love how it layers together. I love how the yellow brings in some tiny bits of blue and green in it. I feel like it makes it really shine. And then the cloud that sweeps through gets some of those same colors. I am really enjoying the use of lemon yellow here. I'm trying to avoid my yellow ochre so that way I can just keep things shining bright. I feel like to be able to get more movement, it was a good idea to study Van Gogh because, he brings in that natural movement into his paintings, and I feel like I could use that. And now I'm getting deep into the contrast. I feel like I'm at a good place with the night sky, and I'm ready to go into those deep hills that are in the background. I was a little bit nervous to come into the foreground because I didn't want to paint all the buildings that he had here. And so I start safe with just drawing, the rolling hills. I feel like you have to be so intentional with how you're placing your brush strokes and the direction of the way it's going, because it really would ruin the flow of a painting if I'm just bringing it around and then I cut it across. I feel like you have to understand where it's coming together and not be really harsh with this. This painting is very organic. Oh my goodness, when I start to bring in the light blue into these hills that are in the back, I feel like it just starts to make it glow. I feel like this entire painting is glowing, and I really want that glowing effect in more of my own paintings, not just in Van Gogh's paintings. And then when I layer more in the foreground, I feel like it's just all starting to really beautifully come together. And I'm trying to make sure there's contrast within the layer itself. I feel like sometimes I would go in with a hue that just made the cloud's too flat, and then I'd have to come in with a darker blue, and then the thing is then it would be way too dark and I'd have to go light again. I feel like it starts to have a, chalk pastel effect in a way. I feel like I'm not used to acrylics necessarily looking like this, but I like the way it does look. I feel like this taught me a lot about color theory and how to mix colors and bringing in colors that aren't too crazy to bring in, because Van Gogh does go crazy with his colors. Okay, and I feel like I got to a certain point where I felt like the sky was good, the foreground was good, but I felt like there's still a little bit something missing. And so I went ahead and painted the church. I feel like it really brought this together and really made it feel like, okay, this is Starry Night. I didn't want to put too much detail into it though, because I didn't want to be too concrete with what I was doing, because again, we're trying to keep this loose, we're trying to keep it flowing. I'm not trying to make an exact replica of Starry Night. It's more of a study and exercise for me to understand why this person thought the way he did and use it to kind of think and question my own paintings. I feel like it's better to copy a whole variety of artists. Like, I'm not just about to go paint a bunch of Van Gogh paintings, or else I feel like I will just be painting Van Gogh. And I don't want my work to be Van Gogh, I want it to be Caroline's Corner. I feel like at a certain point, the stars are there, but they're not quite glowing how I want them to. And so I finally take that yellow ochre and put it in the center of each of the stars to make it just like really shine deep. And then the moon, I was very nervous to paint the moon because I feel like it's such an essential part of this painting. I feel like if I got the moon wrong, like it would all be wrong. And so I left this to last. I then go and add in a dark line to the chapel because I feel like without it, it's just a white gray space sitting there in the landscape, and I think that I was able to blend it in well enough into the made up foreground that I did that you don't truly notice, or at least I hope you don't. And then the last and final step, I went back into the cypress tree, and you really can't see a lot of the work I end up doing here. It's just a lot of layering. I feel like it does more to the in-person eye than it does to, my camera eye, but it works. If you liked watching me paint Starry Night, stick around and subscribe, and you'll be able to see me steal more of the classics by painting it in my own style. Do you like this one better or the original Starry Night? I won't be offended if you say the original. This was Caroline. Thank you so much for spending some time in my corner, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.